impact on the city of Charlottesville's hiring of Aon Consulting to look at library staff positions and job descriptions and to implement a new performance assessment system. Lindsay and I were both here back then. We had to fill out staff surveys about what we did, what our job responsibilities were, that kind of thing. The city was changing at that time to a bands and stages system of job classifications, and the library did the same. The new performance appraisal system required the library produce detailed documents outlining each position's competencies, the skills, knowledge, and behaviors critical to the success of the organization. JMRL's compensation committee was formed to write up these job competencies for each type of position and to compile the JMRL performance appraisal manual, which documents the procedures in the assessments. The city has since changed their performance appraisal system. I'm gonna eventually, David, I'm gonna share screen. Yeah.
Do you want to, or do you want me to share?
I can do it. I'm going to do it a little later when we talk about the proposed minimum wage concern. So I can do it at that point, I think.
Okay.
So the compensation of the JMRL Compensation Committee has changed over several years, of course. The goal is to have representation across the region and from different jobs, bands, and stages. And committee members, to be on the committee, they need to have been through JMRL's performance process at least once. So we don't want someone who's just joined JMRL to sign up for the compensation committee. They need to have been through the process a few times, at least for 1 year. So the current composition of the committee is myself as the chair, Lindsay Eiderson as the Northside branch manager, Mary Lamb, who's a supervising technical services librarian at Central, Dakota Marsh, who's a shelver in Crozet, Anne Marie Parrish, she's a children's specialist at Gordon Avenue, Heather Pennick, she's the reference librarian volunteer coordinator here at Central, and Zach Weiser, who is in collections and HR specialist here at Central. The committee recently met actually, and I will tell you some of our activities and purposes. For the past few years, we've been working on maintaining job title consistency as JMRL positions change and evolve over time. We also vet and make recommendations on manager requests for job reclassifications, monitor trends in library compensation and evaluation systems, answer staff and manager questions on the evaluation process and procedures. So new staff, new managers who might have questions about how it works here at JMRL. As part of the orientation process, I also explain our evaluation system to new staff. And we're also looking to implement something simpler, perhaps have a new system by the end of fiscal year 2023. It's in JMRL's 5-year plan, Goal 3, Objective 12, to look at our performance appraisal system. Our most recent agenda meeting dealt with how JMRL can address the state mandated changes to the minimum wage and the impact on JMRL. I think everyone here knows that the state mandated a minimum wage coming up of $9.50 effective May 1st of 2021. And then on January 1st of 2022, it will be an $11 per hour minimum wage. And we do have JMRL staff members who are not currently at that rate. I'm going to share, hopefully. I believe.
I'm sorry, Krista, what month was that in 22 again?
It is effective January 1st of 2022.
January.
David, I don't know if I have that available. Can you pull up the bands and stages pay scale, David?
Yeah, absolutely.
And share it. That way you all see what we're talking about. These are the staff committees. And this is the pay scale that outlines the bands and stages. We have 3 bands, and within each band, there are different stages. What we were talking about at our most recent committee meeting is the fact that you'll see our minimum wage there in stage 1, band 1 is $10.40 an hour, and we do have some staff making that pay rate. You'll see that courier, custodian, and shelver positions are in that stage 1, band 1. What we are proposing to help address this minimum wage situation is that we would merge stage 1 and stage 2 in band 1, and we would turn shelvers into support level positions available to use in circulation, which happens from time to time, especially at some of the smaller branches. Gordon Avenue, for instance, where I used to work, circulation staff would go to lunch, and sometimes we'd have someone else covering the desk. Frequently it was a shelver, so they do have some circulation experience, and they're called on to do that from time to time. So we're suggesting that that would be called shelving support, and that would allow branch managers to shift staff to what they need and provide relief and backup at circulation. It also helps with cross-training, which is also a 5-year plan goal, and it has been especially critical during the pandemic. We've had people have to be able to do a variety of things. Another thing on our recent agenda was to look at recommendations on 2 staff reclassification requests. So a branch manager might have a position that they realize is doing job tasks beyond what is their set job description or competencies. So they could bring those requests to the JMRL Compensation Committee to consider making changes in the position name and pay grade. We have also suggested change in JMRL's annual leave accrual rates to be compatible with the city. I think everybody knows the city does our HR, and we found out that the city has a different leave accrual rate than JMRL. JMRL has had the same accrual rate for 25 years. So when we realized that the city's was slightly different, we looked at that and we recommended that we consider switching to the city's accrual leave system, since we're already using a lot of their other, we use them as our HR agent. Another task that the committee has been working on is updating the assessment manual, which was last updated in 2011. So that's 9 years. It's a lot of things that have changed over time that we just need to keep up with in terms of the terminology. For instance, the library's mission statement has changed. We have the former mission statement in the assessment manual, so we need to update at that and make sure it's current and consistent with everything that's going on. And then we've been updating job competencies as needed to be current and accurate as jobs have changed over time. We've added new positions in the last 5 to 10 years, things like the PR communication specialist, the digital services manager, different positions that have been added in, and we've had to figure out where they fit, and then we've had to come up with the competencies for those positions. So those are the kinds of tasks the JMRL Compensation Committee has been working on. Do you have any questions at this time?
Did you say that was just you and Lindsay?
Oh no, just me and Lindsay no, there's a committee.
Okay.
Yeah, remember it's me, Lindsay.
A full committee. Well, it is a huge amount of work for however many people you have there. Thank you for all of that.
Yes, and we had been meeting somewhat as needed, and of course the pandemic, as with many JMRL committees, has set our schedules back a little bit, but we are meeting and trying to keep up to date on things, and we have to meet usually when there's a reclassification request, and now we really have to tackle this minimum wage issue and figure out how JMRL is going to handle it, because we don't have a choice, and we think we will be able to come up with a way to do that.
And so you mentioned that the recommendation was to reclassify the shelvers as support staff. Custodians then just get the increase to $11 to meet the minimum wage requirement from the state. Did I miss what
right. Their job tasks didn't change.
There?
It was custodians, couriers, and shelvers are the only positions that are impacted. And I think you all know how critical the couriers are to our operations. And this past summer, David got some hands-on experience to find out what a tough job it is. I don't think anyone has any no one would debate us that the couriers deserve to be making at least that minimum. And right, the shelvers, it's really the one that makes a big difference in branch to branch operations. We have more shelvers than we do couriers or custodians for sure. So that will give us more flexibility in those positions.
So they would be moving up. There'd be a new, their band 1, stage 1 now would be the 2 of those 2 compressed. So we would just take those current competencies and move them up, assuming that as Krista said, I think that affects 3 people at JMRL. The shelving class is a bigger class, and in order to justify, we have to pay the minimum wage, but in order to justify the rise in stage, we need to add more responsibilities, and also will give, as Krista said, more flexibility moving forward.
Right, so instead of having 4
Makes
stages
perfect
in
sense.
band
Thank you very
1, we
much.
would just start with stage 2. Sorry, go ahead.
No, just saying that makes perfect sense. Thank you.
Okay.
Hello, this is Lisa. I just had a quick question.
Uh-huh.
I was wondering, I know that Nakaya and other folks in the city have been pushing for a $15 minimum wage, and I thought that they had achieved that to match the university minimum wage of $15 an hour that was effective January 2020. And I was wondering, how does that compare to the minimum wage that we are working with, and the idea of where JMRL, I don't know, I was just thinking about that and the
Sure.
discrepancies between this minimum wage versus the minimum wage that the city is offering versus how we think about a living wage. Like, how does all that work together? Or, you know, what are your thoughts on that, Krista?
Right, that's a great question. And we've had staff members on the committee bringing up that issue because they read the paper, you know, they pay attention. And David and I, when we met with Albemarle County earlier, last month, or when they were looking at their budget projections, Albemarle County had been planning to move to the $15 minimum wage also. And they have, I think, have had to make adjustments, and they're not necessarily going to be able to do that as planned. I think that's a bigger question, and we've been talking about this ever since it's been in the news. But JMR, it would really be a big difference for JMRL because we're a regional system. You know, we're not just the city of Charlottesville. We're Albemarle, we're Greene, Louisa, and Nelson. And I think we might have some trustees here that could speak to that. But if, you know, we raise the minimum wage for JMRL to $15 an hour, and there's likely people working in Nelson, Louisa, and Greene for the local county government that are not making $15 an hour. Go ahead, David.
Yeah, Lisa, I will point out that the goal in the 5-year plan that Krista is talking about mentions using regional living wage scales as part of a comprehensive review of JMRL's pay scale. The other thing is that this wage raise from the state goes $9.50, $11, and then up to I think either $12.50 or $13. I can't remember. And then there are 2 unfunded laws after that where none of them are funded, I should say, but 2 unpassed laws where they're trying to get to $15 by 2025. So if that passes in the state, then that's going to be the statewide minimum wage, and every jurisdiction, every business is going to have to meet that. So JMRL is using that as a benchmark in order to try and raise salaries across the board to get to that $15 by that time, if not before. The issue is, as Krista said, you know, we operate on our own pay scale. Our employees are not City of Charlottesville employees. They're employees of the regional library system.
Right.
And because there are 5 different jurisdictions there offering 5 different sorts of pay, and we move as a whole. So all the shelvers would move no matter where they are into this new banded stage. And if we get a new minimum wage, then all of our employees meet there. It's much more difficult covering 5 jurisdictions, but it is a long-stated goal to raise our salaries. We've done that over the years thanks to the help of the personnel committee, but $15 and a true living wage is definitely an important goal that's in the 5-year plan.
And let me also mention, of course, you all know we just finished a compression study, and you know, there's minimum wages, and David, I have it in front of me. It's May 1st, $9.50 an hour, May 1st, 2021, $9.50 an hour, January 1st, 2022, $11 an hour. And then January 1st, 2023 is $12 an hour. And these have already been mandated by the state. So, you know, as soon as we do that, then that creates a new compression issue. So I'm just throwing that out there because it's true.
Yes. Thank you for that as well. Thank you both for the response to this question. I just wanted to keep that live in the conversation.
Sure.
I guess I tend to think about these things from a position of abundance. Not as opposed to scarcity, even though scarcity is what a lot of us are facing right now. I just keep thinking that the JMRL system is so wonderful and powerful and great. And it'd be nice if the people who are doing the work there can be, you know, compensated fairly so that they're not looking to go to somewhere else, or they're not looking to do another job that might be more lucrative. And even though folks who work in the library love it, but that should not be a reason to pay people less, I guess, you know, because that happens a lot with teachers. You know, teachers don't teach for the money, they teach for the love of teaching. I'm like, well, the love of teaching is not going to pay anybody's mortgage. And so I would really like it if we could just think seriously about how we can compensate the people who are really the lifeblood of the library. So thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. That's for sure part of the purpose of this committee.
A follow-up maybe on some of that. Have we, gamed out or planned out a scenario with, hey, if we were to add 15 as the minimum, how would that affect our operating costs? I mean, isn't that ultimately, I'm in favor of, compensating our very valuable employees as best we can, but isn't it ultimately up to the jurisdictions what they'll agree to fund? And so what does that scenario even look like? Have we started, thinking forward to, what the bottom line, how that would affect the bottom line?
Yeah, we've done some work just in the budgeting process, basically, Mike, to put together like what those salary scales would look like in the next few years to get to that by 2025, and what it would mean for each jurisdiction. And you're absolutely right that in the end, the decision for some of the jurisdictions is going to be, in order to fund pay raises, they might look at scaling down staffing. So that's the balance that we're going to have to, that's the tightrope there. There's a finite pool of money, and it might be that we can get to that point, but we would need to shave some things in order to get there. But yes, we've started working on that. We've started talking to our jurisdictions about it. They're facing these same issues when it comes to the state mandated laws. Like, who knows where, 4 years from now might as well be a million years from now, basically, when it comes to what the state will do on this. But things are definitely moving that way. I 100% agree with Lisa and what she's saying about, needing to fully compensate our staff for the work they're doing. So yeah, we've got some scenarios worked out, some that deal with compression and some that just don't. And that might be where we end up, that there's just going to be massive compression that we're going to be dealing with for years and years and years.
The compression is where the cost is. So there's no doubt that we want to bring people up to the minimum. And this is how we did it when we first raised the pay scale. When I first joined the board, this is how we did it, because it's a simple way to say, hey, look, our folks aren't even making the minimum of what other regional systems are paying their staff. And so once again, we look at, hey, our folks aren't even making what the state mandated minimum wage is. And so we bring those folks up. But then it does create, especially I think, in these frontline people, right? The front desk people, the shelvers, the drivers, the folks who are working one-on-one with the public all the time, in a normal way, pre-COVID, but even now they are. And so, that's a big bulk of our staff. And so if you have somebody who's been here 5, 10 years and is making the same amount as somebody who just was brought up, brought up to the minimum wage, we need to address that as well. We need to budget for that as well. And I think that's really where the chunk of the cost will be.
And our two largest funding bodies both have plans. Charlottesville's already, as Lisa mentioned, at 15, and as Krista mentioned, Albemarle was going to be at 15 this year, but had to delay that because of the COVID rebudgeting. So they're well aware of the needs and what that would mean in terms of their budget moving forward. And I think both of them would be very supportive of that. So I think if we can get the majority of our budgeting working that way, then we could get creative in the next few years to figure out ways to get there.
Any other questions?
Thank you, Krista.
Okay, thank you.
That was really helpful.
Thank you so much for all your hard work. Thank you.
Sure, let me know. And you can look on the staff intranet for additional information.
All right, we'll move on to new business. When David and I set up the agenda for this meeting, I knew that staff leave accrual was going to be coming up on our agenda sometime soon. And I asked David to put together a little bit of a beginning of thinking about leave accrual and annual leave and sick leave in the context of our staff compensation. So David, do you want to introduce the material that you sent out?
Sure. Yeah. So this is based on the recommendation that came through the compensation committee that Krista just mentioned, that JMRL align our vacation leave accruals with the city of Charlottesville's vacation leave accruals. So it's in the handouts that I shared with you. I'll go ahead and share screen again to show you where JMRL is with that. Oh, geez. Okay, pay scale, where is, here we go, our handouts. So if we just take, I think we'll just look at the 40 hours so that you all can get an understanding of the scale that we're talking about here. Basically for JMRL, between 0 and 5 years, employees earn 6.67 hours per month of vacation leave, which works out to 2 weeks a year. Then at 5 years, they get up to 10 hours a month, which works out to 3 weeks a year of vacation time. And at 15 years, they get up to 13.33, which is 4 weeks of vacation time annually. So the differences there are 0 to 5 years, 5 to 15 years, and then 15 on. The city of Charlottesville, which is, you know, we use as an HR wing, does this a bit differently. Look at their 40 hours here. They do from 0 to 3, you get 2 weeks. And then from 3 to 5, you get 2.5. So that would be the first difference that JMRL would have. It would be half a week of vacation for employees working between 3 and 5 years at JMRL. And currently they're not getting that extra half week. And then from 5 to 10, it's 3, which is the same as JMRL. But then from 10 to 15, another half week step. So we're talking about 2 points there that JMRL would be different from what they currently are and matching what the city does. Okay. So Marcy asked me to look around and see both what our local jurisdictions and what other libraries are doing. I have some information for you. I think my hope was that you all would kind of absorb this information today and then either have the board discuss it and vote on it next month, or ask the personnel committee to look at it more closely and bring it back at a later date. We see here what Charlottesville does. Albemarle has a totally different schedule in which they do 1 day per month for each month a person is employed during the first 5 years of continuous employment. So it's constantly building every month. And then after that, after 5 years, it goes to 1.25 days for each month employed. And then 1.5 days, the 11th through 15th years. And then what I got from JMRL's, and I'm sorry, I have UVA libraries as well. Under 3 years, they accrue at 22 days per year. And theirs is a combination of vacation and sick leave. We're just talking about vacation for JMRL now. And then again, at 3 to 6 years, they go to 24 days per year, 7 to 9, 26, 10 to 19, 28, 20 and above 30. So I sent a survey out to the public libraries across the state and got minimal response. It's a rough time for surveys for public libraries right now. But about over 75% of the libraries that responded, I think we had 18 responses, and 13 of them said that they don't make a change until 5 years, which is where JMRL is currently. The rest of them were all over the place. And the range at which they accrue was really varied. Basically, every library had its own different system. And this is 18 responses out of the 100+ public libraries. Most of them are pretty similar to what JMRL is doing now, with a few tweaks here and there, and all of them had their tweaks basically. So I wanted to show you too, Marcy asked for what dollar figures would be. So this is a similar conversation to the one that we had concerning an extra vacation day earlier in this year. There would be no, Marcy, correct me if I've misstated here, but we would not see a budgetary impact. We wouldn't have to go back to the jurisdictions and ask for more money to do this. There would be an impact in work hours, of course, and managers would need to be able to, at 3 to 5 years, schedule for those extra 2.5 days for employees, and then again when they get to 10 years. So JMRL's managers have been discussing this. They don't have a problem with it. They think it's a manageable system. Trying to get the history of this from staff that were here in the 80s when this happened, I think that there was fear then that there would not be enough coverage and that temporary employees would have to be used, which were much more prevalent at that time, like time card, substitute employees that over time JMRL has converted into regular employees. But let me show you on the audit here where this shows up. And our audit, this is last year's audit, so this is out of date a little bit, and it's linked from the About page of the JMRL website, so you can find it as well. Under our financial statements, there's a line that says compensated absences due within 1 year, and this is basically 12% of our total value of what our leave, our vacation leave is, JMRL's vacation leave. And then these compensated absences due in more than 1 year is $216,535. So the auditors get an accounting for how much leave is being carried over year to year. And then they basically assign a dollar amount to that based on the value of each position, the hourly wage. And they look at that and say, here's money that's a liability for JMRL. We owe this money down the road at some point. So that's where we would see this in the audit. If we made a change here, that number would go up because we would have more employees earning more leave. This number, FYI, for this year is going to be much higher because of the decision to carry over leave, to not do a leave carryover until next summer. So basically everyone's vacation carried over throughout fiscal year 21, and then next year in July, it's going to revert back to the current carryover amount, which is 1 year plus 2 weeks, basically. It's what you can accrue in a year plus 2 weeks vacation. So that's the cap. You can't take any more than that into the next fiscal year. So if JMRL were to make this change, it would affect 24 employees in the 3 to 5 years of service and 13 employees between the 10 to 15 years. And of course, that's a rolling number. Every year that would change. There's no discussion about retroactively going back. It's just folks that are in that path now would start accruing at a different rate until they hit the next milestone. All in all, it's about $1,100 of new vacation. I'm sorry, 1,100 new vacation hours. So not the dollar amount, that's the total hours, 1,100. And a rough guess is that on this line here in the audit would equal about $23,000 in future liabilities. That was a lot of numbers.
In addition to what we're seeing here for the
Yes.
previous year. So we're talking about almost doubling it.
I'm sorry, say that again?
We're talking about almost doubling the compensated absences due within 1 year.
Actually, likely not, Marcy, because the way they figure that is to take the total and they just take 12%. They assume that there's going to be 12% due in the current year. That's the number that the auditors in the city have settled on. So it would be the 216,535 plus the 23,000. It would be 12% of that total.
But you're not raising the caps on how much leave people can accrue, right? You're just changing the rate at which it accrues. So ultimately, shouldn't that number still be capped at the same amount as before?
On the compensated absences due within 1 year,
Yeah.
line right here. Thomas, I believe they would take 12% of the total carryover, and if folks earn a little bit more, then their what they can carry over goes up a little bit more. Because if they earn more within a year, they get.
Gotcha, right, plus 2 weeks. I've gotcha, yeah.
So my hope, Marcy, was to be able to share this information. I'm still gathering information from the other libraries across the state and then have the board come up with a process for how to make this decision, basically.
Okay, so we're not expecting us to try to make a decision within the next meeting, correct?
Correct, yeah. I think logically the timelines to make a change would be January 1 or July 1. So if we don't do it next month, then we would look at July.
Okay. You know, I think there are a lot of questions here that it may be very useful to have the personnel committee look at in a smaller group. I think this has to be looked at in terms of overall compensation. And it also needs to be looked at in terms of what impact this would have on hiring and retention of employees. I don't know that we've ever really delved into what our hiring and retention successes are. And how much the leave policy might be impacting that. But, you know, we've already given another holiday every year with the addition of Juneteenth at the last meeting or 2 weeks ago. And I appreciate that the managers feel they could absorb this kind of change, but I think we really need to think carefully about the hours and how that's going to influence our service provisions. We've certainly had a stressful year with some staff having to be out, and certainly having to rearrange all of the library services pretty dramatically this year. So it's hard to use this year as a baseline.
That's true.
For how this would impact the services.
Could I ask a quick question about this?
Please do, Thomas.
Could I ask a quick question?
Please, yes.
David, I'm just curious, from the last presentation that you just did about, I'm sorry, that we just got from Krista about recategorizing shelvers, would any of those expanded responsibilities allow them to cover some of the expected use of vacation that we're talking about increasing here?
In general, yes, the idea is to allow the shelving position to be a support level position, which means being able to cover a front desk and being able to offer service at any front desk. So yes, that's the theory. We've run into it basically during the pandemic where we've had shortages, as Marcy alluded to, and we've sent staff from one location to another, but this would it would open up an opportunity for even within a branch to have a little bit more flexibility for who can work what position.
Okay, thank you.
I guess I would follow up on Marcy's comment. For me, what I would kind of need to understand is what are the trade-offs. I think Marcy characterized them generally as sort of a service level trade-off, but what we kind of didn't see with the holiday discussion, and maybe I'm not seeing it yet, is, okay, if we go with this scenario, we see what's going to happen on the benefit side, and what would be the corresponding scenario on the service side. What exactly are we talking about? I'm getting the general idea that we think we can cover it with existing staff. Does that mean existing staff are doing a few extra hours a week to cover? Does it mean, where's the trade-off coming from? And I'm not asking for that question to be answered right now, but if you're saying, well, we're going to have a discussion and make a decision, that's the piece of the puzzle that I'd like to feel like I could understand clearly, just from a due diligence standpoint.
No, I appreciate that, because I know, especially down here in Scottsville, for instance, we were using those flexible hours to do a lot of additional programming and that sort of thing. And so if those types of hours are going to be stretched just to fill basic, meeting the need of somebody on vacation, does it allow for less flexibility and that kind of thing? I think there are important questions there that we could look into from the personnel committee side.
And could we also look at it on a branch by branch basis? Is that possible?
Well, it's hard to think about altering a policy that wouldn't be across the entire system.
No, it would be across the entire system, but
What the impact.
Yeah. For each.
Right.
Right.
Because
Sure.
maybe there isn't really a lot of impact in Scottsville, but where you would see an impact is a big place like Northside, where you have folks who have been there a long time and might accrue more hours of leave and then take that leave. And, as we discussed, I think they're already short-staffed a little bit. So.
Yeah, we could do that. We could map it out on a branch by branch, like where are most of those employees?
Right, and obviously it would just be a snapshot of our existing employees, but then that would balance out when somebody leaves and somebody new comes in at the 0 year, right? Potentially.
I know the personnel committee is going to have to meet anyway to discuss this reconfiguration of band 1, stage 1 and band 1, stage 2 that Krista also mentioned earlier. So does it make sense, Marcy, to task the personnel committee to get together to work on a report on both of those issues?
I think we'd better check with Carla.
Yeah, we're ready. I just think it's a question of, are we going to vote on this sooner rather than later?
It seems to me that this is a much more complicated issue, and really doing due diligence for what it's going to do to impact the system and its functioning, I think is going to take more time than just in between now and the meeting at the end of December.
Okay.
So I would hope that the compensation committee can help us put together the information that we need along with the administrative staff and work on this through the spring once we've gotten the budgeting process through and are waiting for the jurisdictions to respond to our budget requests.
I think we have a hard deadline of July 1 because of the budget for next year and also because the chair of the personnel committee will be leaving.
And I think that's fine. I think we should be able to, don't you, Carla? We should be able to put something together that would make sense for.
Yeah, I just didn't want to promise anything by January 1. So
That's fine. I think staff is really going to appreciate that the board is willing to consider this. The recommendation came from Northside, actually. So while all those things, Carla, you mentioned are true at the busiest branch there, the request came from staff there.
great. Yeah, it's good to know.
Thank you all.
Thanks, David. We have another grant that's come into the library that we need to hear about and approve. David?
Yes, the reference staff at the Central Library applied for a grant from the All of Us Book Club Kit grant from the network of the National Library of Medicine. And effectively, this is going to be up to $300 to be spent on book club kit out of a cross-section of titles that they had available. The title that the grant was written for was called Switched On, a memoir of brain change and emotional awakening. So staff would use the funds to buy the book club kit and any supplementary materials that go in that. Staff are seeking a motion from the library board to accept this grant from the network of the National Library of Medicine for up to $300 for the purchase of book kit books.
I think it's great that the staff is making applications for these kinds of special services. Do I have a motion to accept this grant?
So moved.
Thanks, Jim. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Bye.
Is there anyone opposed? Thank you, it carries unanimously. The next thing on our agenda for new business is Mike Powers, just briefly introducing our discussion about removing policy 4.33, printing, copying, and moving some of the information there to other sections in our policy manual and the staff manual.
I think you just covered it.
Want me to share that, Mike, for everyone to look at?
You can share it, and while you're doing that, David, I apologize, I didn't have a chance to touch base with you in advance. The one pending detail was I know you had run it by the managers, and what feedback did we get from them? Was there any feedback that's...
Yes, so the only feedback is that we need to get these costs that are baked into number 1, 2, and well, number 1 and 2 here into the schedule of fines and fees, which of course the board reviews annually anyway in the spring. So we just would need to add those when the board next reviews the fines and fees. Basically this will become part of staff procedure. We'll take most of this document and add it to staff procedure. The only concern was making sure that somewhere JMRL does make clear that compliance with copyright laws and the use of library equipment is the responsibility of the user. So currently that's signage that's up at every copy machine and near computer stations. That was the only question basically, is how we're gonna make sure that the public is aware that they are responsible for complying with copyright.
I recall, David, that there was a question about how much staff was using in terms of item 4.
Yes, thank you. So that came up with the managers as well. It seemed like there was really not a tremendous amount of use here. And I also reached out to the Friends of the Library to see what their usage was, and it's minimal. They get professionally printed, the things that they send out now. So what the staff is going to end up doing is setting a limited free copies per month per employee. So I can't remember what number they landed on, but like 5 to 10 free personal use copies. And then after that, it would be 10 cents a page.
And that would be in procedure.
That would be procedurally, yeah.
Yep.
Great.
So this is a weird one though, Mike. I'm not sure how the motion would go to basically remove a policy.
I think that we'll just make that, I mean, we're rewriting the policy by deleting it. So I think you can just motion to remove it.
Do you want to make that motion, Mike?
Sure, I so move.
Is there any discussion of this? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Is there anyone opposed to this?
Aye.
No opposition. Thank you very much. That is also passed unanimously. The next item on the agenda is Thomas Unsworth with the Budget Committee report.
Thank you very much. And I'll start just by saying big thank you to Jerry and all the staff and other committee members. This was a lot of work that went into it. And David, should I just let you walk us through that? Do you want me to sort of introduce it in a little bit, in so many words?
Sure. Jarrett, everybody should have it in the budget. The full budget is in their packet, the handouts. So it's available now on the web. And then should the board vote on this today, we'll get it posted as our proposed budget and start sending it around to jurisdictions. So Thomas, I think my takeaways from what the budget committee discussed and this board is aware of because of the personnel committee's report is that basically the budget that's being proposed includes a 2% cost of living raise for staff, which of course there was no cost of living raise last year. And a new position in Nelson, which the Nelson Board of Supervisors is aware of, JMRL has had for a few years. Increased costs for retirement. The folks that are on the defined benefit retirement plan saw an increase in cost this year. And 9 positions going up to that $11 minimum wage step that Krista mentioned as part of the compensation committee. So those were the additions to the budget there, which led up to a total increase in the proposed budget of 2.4%, which I think is a reasonable request for the jurisdictions. The percent, Carla asked me before the meeting started, the percent of circulation per jurisdiction, which is how the regional costs are divided, has shifted a little bit. All Greene, Louisa, and Nelson were all down. It's a 3-year running average, basically, but this year was down from last year in all 3 of those jurisdictions. Albemarle and Charlottesville were up a little bit, so we saw decreased costs in Greene, Louisa, and Nelson for their share of regional costs. And then everywhere else, costs were pretty static. Jerry and I took a good look at the operational budget to cut where we could. There would be a luxury going into next year that weren't needed to meet our 5-year plan goals, and came up with a pretty, as close as we can get to a balanced budget while also giving a 2% raise to staff. I'm happy to answer any particular questions about any part of the budget there.
Not to get too far into.
I would just expand on that. Sorry, go ahead.
The tangent would be.
Sorry, go ahead, Mike.
Yeah. You say that the share of circulation is down in those, but is it up in an absolute value, but it's just up more in the other jurisdictions?
Last year, of course, we're using the numbers from last fiscal year, it was down because of the pandemic, libraries being closed and then curbside service in the tail end of the year. So overall circulation for fiscal year 20 was down from fiscal year 19. It was about 1.3 million down from 1.6, I think.
Okay. Because we're covering the first half of 2020.
Yes, it goes,
Okay,
goes July through June, basically.
Okay.
So that those numbers likely, are a bit skewed because of that. And then when curbside became available again, they started to fit into the same pattern of here's our usage, and this mirrors our usage. It's Albemarle the most, then Charlottesville, then Greene, then Louisa, then Nelson. That's always the pattern there. There's some fluctuation. It seemed odd to me this year that Greene, Louisa, and Nelson, all 3 of them were down as a percent of the pie. And I wonder if some of that does have to do with usage during the pandemic.
But do I also recall that we use a 3-year rolling average?
Correct, yeah.
Okay, so really that's 1/6. The pandemic period is sort of.
It's a small period.
1/6 of the pie, okay.
And the changes here weren't dramatic, Mike. They were under, 0.2% in each case, but every little change affects, when you're talking about dollar amounts that are close to $1 million there.
Okay.
Large dollar amounts.
Good. Any other things?
The only thing I would add is just there were a few things that we left out. You may remember from the personnel committee report last month, 2 months ago, I forget when it was. The IT position, sort of centralized IT position, and some staff expansion at Northside that we had talked about that were left out of this final version. in hopes that we could pursue that 2% cost of living adjustment for all staff. And that some of these other things we've talked about today, the 9 positions going up to $11 an hour and expanded shelving responsibilities, other things like that might help get us some of the way there where we need to be, but we'll keep working on those things as we go forward. Like David said, if we're comfortable with this budget today, we could go ahead and adopt this to let staff continue working with our funding jurisdictions on refining it as they go through their budget process. The more time we give them, I think the better. And then again, we'll have a final version in June to make a final adoption vote on.
David, we are pretty clear about our increased retirement costs.
Yes.
I'm assuming that you still haven't heard anything definitive about the medical costs, although the city is assuming that they are not going to increase. Is that...
They have definitively told me that they are staying static, that they are not changing.
That's very encouraging.
Yes, hopefully that will remain the case throughout the end of the year. It seems like when they do change, it's usually in December.
Yes.
So that would give us enough time to pivot again. But I'm assuming based on conversations with the city that the medical did not go up, which was a real blessing this year. And the retirement number is set. They've got their actuarial information. That's
So as far as we know, this budget is pretty close to what will need to go forward.
yes, with the added with the things that I've highlighted.
Does anyone else have any questions about the budget? Any concerns? Well, it sounds to me as if we might be able to go ahead and accept this budget at the meeting today and hopefully be able to move forward then working with the jurisdictions. Do I have a motion to accept this budget? Lisa, did you have something else?
So moved.
Thank you.
So moved.
Thank you. We have a motion on the floor to accept the budget as presented in our packets for this meeting. I'm going to go, since this is a pretty important decision, I'm just going to go person by person and take your vote so that it's clear. And you're going to be in any kind of order that you're on my screen. So Jim, your vote?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
Thomas?
Aye.
Lisa?
Aye.
Kathy?
Aye.
Wendy?
Aye.
Carla?
Aye.
And I will also vote aye. So it passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Now we have the hard work to work with the jurisdictions. And I know that David's going to be talking with people about meetings with the administrative staff in the near future. The next thing is David's update on our COVID response.
Yes, thank you. So since this group last met, Crozet and Scottsville have opened for Tier 3 service. Actually, I believe they had just barely been open the last time you met. I just got some information for you on that. So I've got appointment schedule data for each location that I can also send around if this is just all too much all at once. But Crozet has had 363 appointments scheduled through last Friday. All this information was through last Friday. 37 of those were computer use, so that's about 10% of the use was for computer use. That question had come up before, like what that was going to be. They did have our first entirely booked day, so this was a question that Mike had brought up early on. You know, how are we going to track people that get turned away? And up until this point, it had been we could offer another session for an individual or family at that same location during the day. But Crozet has had at least one day where they have had to turn people away that day and book them for future days. And they were able to do that. So the people were able to get into the library, but not at their date of choice. Louisa has had 305 appointments. 115 of those were computer usage. So you could see that that's about a third. It's quite a striking difference from Crozet. Scottsville has had 15 signups, and all of them have been for computer usage. So it continues to be a very slow adoption in Scottsville. Seems to have picked up this week a little bit and towards the tail end of last week, maybe with the newsletter going out. But still, Thomas, anything we can do to spread the word in Scottsville?
Absolutely.
Nelson has had 529 appointments signed up, which is far and away the most of any tier 3 library. 81 computer signups through that point last week. I can't do the math for that in my head, but 81 out of 529. Green has had 449 appointments and 37 computer signups. So the computer usage is definitely behind where I thought it would be at this point. It seems that most families or people coming in are looking to browse and check out materials, or some of them just pick up their holds, which would also still be available curbside, but they just come and get them. So I expect Crozet's numbers will have lapped the rest of these by the time we have your next meeting. Currently, JMRL is using Monday, December 14th as a target planning date for Tier 3 for Gordon, Central, and Northside. So that doesn't mean that that's our opening date, but it means that we are preparing so that if that is an opening date, we can use all the materials will be in place, the staffing, scheduling, things like that will be done. Likely we wouldn't make any announcement until the week before, which is what we did in the 2 other moves to Tier 3 in order to get as much data as possible and kind of up-to-the-minute data. So that might be a slow start without getting, with only 3 or 4 days of headway, but I think it's better safe than sorry. The 14th will give us more time to monitor data and a full picture of what the local impact of this week's travel data will do. So we'll have at least a full 2 weeks to see what our region is looking like. Staff from the 3 in-town locations have been visiting and traveling to Tier 3 libraries to study protocols and procedures. Our protocols are still holding very strong. We have 100% compliance with the public, as far as we know. Usually if we have to remind somebody, it's like they have pulled their mask down in order to make a phone call or to try to talk to somebody. So it's just a mental slip, not a refusal to comply. Last week, JMRL added ILL services back up to full capacity, which had been a goal. If you recall, we started a pilot program with the university to have free ILL locally. That's still going very strong. Once a week, the university is delivering materials to JMRL, and we're distributing them throughout the region to our patrons while their libraries are shut. The problem we ran into there was a copyright issue with materials that they had. The trust system weren't available to lend, so their catalog was available. But it wasn't clear that wasn't. So now that full ILL is back up, we should be able to get materials from people from anywhere. Not all the libraries that we used to borrow from are currently lending, but enough are that service should be back to full speed. So that's an update on the current status of JMRL's COVID response plan. I'm happy to take any questions.
David, I don't have a question, but a request. All the numbers that you just gave us, you're going to be again amending that as time goes on and reporting each time. Do you mind putting that in?
Sure. So
I can take a comparison just to kind of see how we stand and with the other libraries, and that would be good to know. And even our own, every time you do it, then we can monitor the increase ourselves.
You're talking about just an email with that information?
Yeah.
Sure.
Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Are there any other questions or concerns about this?
So maybe a spreadsheet for that. I had one question, David. In terms of adoption you mentioned getting the word out in Scottsville and so forth, and I know we send press releases to all the local media. Can you give us just characterize generally, have those been picked up and resent out in local media that, that would be reaching people that aren't already on our own newsletters or mailing lists and so forth?
Yeah, so far every COVID response press release that we put out has been picked up by the local news, and some of them by the Lynchburg News as well, which covers the Nelson area basically. So whether or not that would reach Scottsville, I'm not sure, because Greene and Louisa have their own publications basically, and Nelson has the Nelson County Times. So they've been picked up by those papers. Scottsville doesn't necessarily have its own newspaper there. It would be in the Daily Progress. So yes, clearly
There's a regional monthly.
there's some newsletter type things, like Brian LaFontaine has a newsletter that he sends out, like Scottsville Happenings, and it's been in that. But I think the real problem in Scottsville is the 1-person occupancy limit, because it effectively means no kids. You know, it means you cannot come in with your family, which has been a very popular use of the library. So until that changes, I think we're going to continue to see lower numbers there. And the EPC wants to get everybody onto tier 3 before we start tweaking, although there have been some tweaks here and there to local procedures. That one, we wanted to get enough data basically to show that we can do that safely in that location.
Yeah, I wouldn't expect to see the Scottsville branch catch up to where, you know, these other branches are, just because of the physical limitations of the space. But I'd like to see more than a couple of people a week using that space. I think what I've seen of general use there pre-COVID, I think there is more of a need than what's represented here in those numbers that David just shared for computer usage and library access. And yeah, I'll work on helping the outreach on that. But I don't think that that's gonna catch up to where those other branches are realistically.
That's one other thing to add that goes back to what Mike said about getting the media buy-in and that letting people know, getting the message out. In Louisa, the newspaper, keeping it the second time, I think, was better. I had more people mention it, but I would still urge to find other ways to get that information out. Maybe groups that are meeting, whether they're meeting Zoom or not, because I still run into people all the time, either virtually or in the grocery store, who don't know. And today, coming in just to do my meeting here, a former student of mine was out front and trying to come in and reading the sign and saying, oh, and this is a student I know who's a very avid library user, at least when I was at the high school. So I think that's probably one of the most important things, is to figure out other ways or to encourage the spread of the information and the openings and the procedures as much as we can. I know I've had several, actually one of the Board of Supervisors told me that they would put it in their newsletter. So I think with reliance on newsletters and other things, maybe we could encourage that and find other ways to get the information out. I know out here in Louisa, it's not getting to everybody.
I wonder if things like some of the local clubs and organizations might be a way of getting this information out.
I think that's a good idea.
We'll
But
work on that in Nelson.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I know Wendy staff have used their mailing lists for programming and for groups and things like that to reach out to folks in Louisa and let them know that the library is open. I think to Mike's point, you have kind of users that, or to Thomas's point too, that need the computer specifically, that might not subscribe to the other, like they're not on the movie mailing.
Right,
like
right.
Those are the folks that I'm concerned about making, how to best reach. So I'm open for any suggestions.
Yeah. And maybe communicating to I'm sure this directly with the schools, I'm sure they've done that as well. But one time is never enough. That's my theory.
Good advice.
Yeah.
What about some of the jobs organizations that would normally be holding job fairs and that sort of thing that aren't happening in person now? They might be good sources for getting some of this information out.
Absolutely.
I just wanted to, and I'm not sure how this will relate, of course, across jurisdictions, but I think I would like to make the observation that we're still in the midst of the pandemic, and that I would not like to see low usage numbers as a sign that the staff or the board isn't working hard enough to get information out there that the library is open. I think that lots of people have made a lot of adjustments to how they move through the world. And so that might mean that, I don't know, I just would like to think that, it was so funny, Wendy, because when you said the spread of information, I was like, the spread of information is not my concern, it's the spread of this virus. That's what we should be worried about, people. I mean, 1 million people got on planes every day.
I completely agree with you.
So
How do you
let's
explain that? There,
I
that's-
completely agree with you.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to keep that in mind. I mean, again, I just want to keep that in mind. I have not left my house for about 9 months. So
I know.
I just,
even,
yes. So that's just all I want to just kind of
Yeah.
throw that in there, that it's not a failure of us not doing enough outreach to get more people in the library. I think that there's people, I think the people, I think folks know, and of course do more. You know, we could, list it in the newsletters and things that go out. And to David's point, if someone is going to the library for computer access, they will not be able to get an email saying that the library is open. So it's necessary for us to have creative thinking around this. But I would feel uncomfortable if we went on this like massive campaign to say, hey, everybody, the library is open,
even
like
with
that kind of thing.
even curbside information is not widespread. So, that's safe. Lisa, you can drive by and they can throw a book in your car.
Excellent. Thank you so much. No, I get it. I just
Yeah.
I'm not trying to derail the conversation. I just wanted to
I get it.
remind. Yeah. And curbside is
Come
great.
to Zoom.
Yes. Thank you.
That's an excellent point, Wendy, about curbside, because I didn't report on any curbside numbers, but I can put that together as well. And you can see that curbside hasn't slowed down at any location that's offering in-person appointments. They're seeing the same amount of use of the contactless. So that goes to Lisa's point, the people that are not interested in coming into the building right now, that has not slowed down at all because there is an option to come in. I'll put some numbers together for that too.
Thank you. And thank you, Lisa.
I would just say I am going to follow up though with the town council here in Scottsville, just to let them know, because they have chosen, and this is just to let you guys in on a little bit of town business down here, they've chosen to shift their allocation of some of the CARES funding from a public work study space that we've been running in the downstairs of the town hall that has been getting relatively low usership numbers. They're shifting some of the funding for that to more food pantry, food assistance funding in the coming months. And so they're going to be closing that. And I would expect people who have been using it, I want to make sure know that they have a place that they can go at the library if they need to make a reservation to do so.
Thanks, everybody, for the comments. We'll keep working on it. But I think that this is going to be an issue that will be important for us to be able to talk about clearly with the jurisdictions as we get to start talking about the budget needs for next year. Because this pandemic is not going to be over into next budget year. So we're going to need to be able to convince people of the utility of supporting this organization as fully as it possibly can be supported. All right, any other comments or questions? We're at the director's report, David.
Time flies. Just a couple things for you all to follow up from last month's report from the Customer Service Committee. We've discussed the possibility of having a joint work session with board members that are interested and then staff that are interested and any members of the public. A date for that has been set. I'll send an invite to the whole staff. December 10th from 3 to 4:30. It will be virtual. And the Customer Service Committee did meet. We're really appreciative of the board's feedback on the statement there and are going to basically take what was there in the board's feedback and whiteboard it at this meeting, and hopefully coming out with a revised statement to bring back to the board. Hopefully most of you have heard, but the most exciting news in local public library news is that the Friends are open for donations again. Only at Gordon Avenue and only at the top of the parking lot, not around where curbside is happening. If you've been there recently, there's a shipping container, which they call a bulk trailer. That's being used to handle donations now. So it's undercover, it's weatherproof. Folks can come, leave the donations on the lip of that container, and then the staff will take them inside. It's Mondays through Saturdays from 10 to 4. As I've mentioned before, this is the most frequent question I've gotten throughout the pandemic is, when are you going to accept donations again? Not at the libraries, but at Gordon Avenue currently. And then just a brief announcement about an exciting partnership that JMRL has taken on with the Office of Diversity and Inclusion at UVA on a community read of Dr. Martin Luther King's book, Where Do We Go From Here? The Office of Diversity and Inclusion is working on an MLK celebration, which they do annually. I think it's going to have to be virtual this year, of course. So they worked with New Dominion Bookshop in Charlottesville to get 192 copies of the books to JMRL to distribute to the community for free, and they're distributed upon request at Central, Gordon, Northside, and Crozet. That's what we had enough books for. But we added more copies to the collection out of that and added some e-copies and e-audio copies for folks to check out. And there's going to be a Zoom discussion for the entire community on January 25th. So more information, including a link, which is not available yet, will go up on their website, and JMRL will cross-promote.
Will we get free copies?
Sure.
Okay, thank
Yeah,
you.
you have your library card with you, Kathy? You just have to bring it back in 3 weeks. I'm teasing. Yes, I have some copies for the board. I just have to figure out a way to get them to you.
That's it, David?
That's all I had, yes.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you for the books. I'm excited. Thanks, David.
Great.
Are there any other issues that anyone on the board would like to raise at this meeting? Future agenda items. We will have a policy committee meeting before the December meeting. Is that correct, Mike?
Yes.
Okay, so we can expect that. And hopefully we will be able to get together with Carlo for the next few months to get feedback on the compensation committee request. David?
Yes, Marcy, to kind of follow up on today's CE on the compensation committee, there have been some interest in the past in having an overview of all staff committees, just with a brief description of what they do. So I was thinking about a December continuing ed that just went through the list along with membership and a brief description of what each group does.
I think the board would find that helpful. Is that good?
It sounds like a good idea.
Great.
I agree. I think that'd be a great idea. Thank you, David.
Sure. I think it was
I just wanted to mention about the personnel committee. I think I'll be reaching out to the personnel committee. I just don't know if it can happen before the next board meeting, but we'll plan before the January board meeting.
I wasn't expecting that, Carla.
Yeah, that's cool.
Good, thank you.
It's a busy time of year, even with COVID.
It is, even in isolation.
Yes.
Is there anything else for the agenda for the next meeting?
No.
Is the date nailed down, Marcy? I know at one
It's the 28th of December.
Okay.
Correct, David? So we'll be meeting between Christmas and New Year's. But I think with people doing very, very limited traveling, that probably is going to be something that we can manage this year more easily than any other. Well, before we adjourn, I will wish you all a very happy and peaceful Thanksgiving, and I hope everyone stays well.
Thank you.
The same. Thank you, Marcy.
I move that the meeting be adjourned.
Thank you, Kathy. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Hi.
No one's opposed. Wonderful. Thank you all very much. And
Happy
again,
Thanksgiving.
safe and peaceful
Thank you.
holiday.
Be
Thank
safe.
you all very much.
Hey, Marcia, one
Take care.
last thing.
Yes,
Since we
Jim.
won't meet before Christmas, so everybody have a good Christmas as well as a proper Thanksgiving, okay?
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.